Hey, good to see
Nice to
you.
see you too. Happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you, thank you. They
Was
fly
it?
by.
Yeah, they sure do. You have too much fun.
Exactly. Well, I like the idea of your Nocturne Allegro Scherzando, the Madrigal, which is used a lot, and the first sonata. What I love about that piece, not only is it beautiful and it's very early, but it really introduced Gobert to Moise. That is a fun little factoid, is the fact that Gobert was asked to be on the jury of the final exams in the year 1906 only because he was the composer of the big piece that they were preparing for the final exam. So he was hearing all of those students that wanted to matriculate. He was hearing all of them. And this is the first time that he actually had a chance to hear this young student named Marcel Moïse, who happened to win that year. And he went up to Moïse after Moïse played, and after the whole thing was done, he said, I would like to work with you. And at this point, Gobert had a young, burgeoning career as the assistant conductor of the orchestra in Paris, the Société de Concert de Conservatoire, which now is the Orchestra de Paris. And so he was less known as a flutist by this time, even though he could still play very well. But he was exploring these options of being a conductor. But also the fact that he had composed this piece as a request by Taffanel, who was his mentor, who was still the professor of flute at the conservatory. He did it, I'm sure, out of love of Taffanel, to honor his mentor. But part of the outcome of it was that he met this young, very brilliantly talented flutist, Marcel Moïse. And it started a relationship that went throughout their lives.
Why is it important to include this piece in our repertoire?
I think it funnels right in with the great concours pieces that we have in our flute repertoire from the Paris Conservatory days. And it's deceptively difficult piece, is my feeling. It looks easy, but it is not all that easy to play beautifully. And I think part of it is that Gobert was enough of a flutist. In fact, he was the premier young flutist in town. At the time, he was first flute in the Société de Concert de Conservatoire, and he was this burgeoning assistant conductor there. But he knew the instrument very well, from the technical, from the tonal standpoint, from colors. And so that the piece that he wrote to honor his beloved mentor, Taffanel, has all of those qualities in it.
To my dear master teacher, Paul Taffanel. This is the first of 10 concours pieces that Gobert wrote for the Paris Conservatory. Gobert was 27 and a member of the flute sections of the Conservatory Orchestra and the Opera Orchestra. As a composer, he was asked to sit on the faculty jury. Marcel Moïse remembers preparing this new piece and winning the coveted first prize in flute by his jury performance. In my 1982 interview with Moïse at age 92, he recalled the moment vividly. He said that famous Gobert was impressed and took an interest in him. establishing a close professional and personal relationship that extended over the next 35 years. The Nocturne and Allegro Scherzando shows the influence of preceding Paris Conservatory concours pieces. The slow, fast scheme, indicated in the title of the same, is found in prior pieces of Louis Gahn and Georges Enesco. The Nocturne is in ABA ternary form. The A theme is presented in D-flat major. The contrasting B section is in E major, with a return to the A theme back in D-flat major. The Allegro Scherzando is in a ternary form, A-A-B-A. In this movement, the pitch center moves up a major third from D-flat major to F. The movement starts in F minor and ends in F major with a dotted rhythmic figure. A number of scale forms are used, including a variety of hexatonic 6-note and pentatonic 5-note scales.
This piece remains one of Gobert's most familiar and performed compositions for flute and piano. It has remained continuously in print for over 100 years, since its first publication in 1906. The slow nocturne offers the performer the opportunity to exhibit tone colors, sensitive phrasing, and expressiveness, while the fast Allegro Scherzando demands brilliant technical facility, integrating a variety of articulations, including double-tonguing. Take the time in the transitions, but don't labor too much on the technique. The flow of your technique is the important factor in this beautiful melodic masterpiece. Notice that Gobert often uses enharmonic pitches in the same measure, moving you from one key center to the next. For instance, in measure 16, he ties an A-flat to a G-sharp in order to move through to the next key. Also, be aware of the pitch of the minor seventh in measure 13, as well as recurring larger intervals. The metronome marking written is astonishingly fast. Speed is relative to the expertise of the player, and this work has many difficult arpeggios and articulated passage work. It requires finesse. Please play slowly and cleanly until you can provide an effortless approach to the speed of these notes. When the slow lyrical section comes, play broader and show your expansion of sound. It should be a much fuller contrast to the whimsical, quick, lively, and brighter tone you should use for the Allegro Scherzando section. Make sure to have clear double tonguing at the final animato. It's the sparkle that is added to the splashy finish. I hope you can enjoy this masterpiece beyond the competition world and include it in your regular concert flute playing life. It stands the test of time.
Well, the instrument, had gone through so many stages at the Paris Conservatory. It started way back in 1792 with Devienne, with his one-keyed flute, and then evolved over the 19th century as the flute became a 3- and 4-keyed instrument, then a 6-keyed instrument. Then finally, Theobald Böhm had developed his new key mechanism, which was embraced by the French. First of all, they were the first ones to embrace that new key system. And by the time, Altes preceded Taffanel, and the music was reflecting the abilities of this new instrument to be able to facilitate such a stronger technical facility, and also still to have a lot of tone color. Those that didn't like the new instrument didn't think it had the tone colors that they were used to from the wooden flute, because that beautiful, soft, sweet sound of the wooden flute is different from our metal flutes. But the great things about the Böhm system flute outweighed it. And so music started to change. The music that was written for this new instrument was much more technical. It was much more bravura. It reflected more of the violin bravado of the 19th century literature of the violin. And so we have this new possibility of things that a composer can do to write for the instrument. And Taffanel was smart enough to go after the best French composers of the time to write these year-end concours pieces that now are part of our basic repertoire. And they were all written to kind of display the potential of this newly embraced flute of the time. And the new metal flute that came out in the 1840s, the mid 1840s, was this it was a combination of silver and some other metals, which made the flute much louder than it had ever been before. It became a real dynamo in the construction of what the flute could do, let's say in a larger chamber ensemble or even an orchestra setting, because all of a sudden you could hear it. You could hear it soar. And that was one of the big things that really made it popular to consider changing over to, because you had to change all the fingerings you'd learned on that old style flute into a new fingering system, and no one wants to do that. But the fact is, there were so many benefits to this new flute. Now, that was reflected in some of the methods and the exercises that were composed to show off this new flute. And that includes the Böhm caprices, all the Böhm pieces. Those were his selling points. When he'd go to try to sell this new flute, he'd play those pieces which were impossible to play on the flute of the day. They were literally impossible to play. And here he was playing them. So that's really how we won over, first of all, France, and then later on some of the other European countries. So, I mean, it was an interesting time. Now, that factors in with the fact that the French conservatory, the Paris Conservatory, had the tradition, a dual tradition of the fact that whoever was the professor of flute at the time was required to produce a method book that is to be used to teach that instrument. And they were required to either write these year-end concours pieces, examination pieces themselves, or find someone else to write them for them. And so you'll see in the history of the Paris Conservatory that a lot of the methods that start way from the beginning with Devienne's method, and then the Hugo Wunderlich method, and then the Altes method, and then the Taffanel, he always had scribbles of sheets that were going to be his method, and he was so busy, he never got around to actually getting it out as a method, which meant it was very important to him because of the tradition that he asked his favorite student, Gobert, who knew everything about Taffanel's method, to do it, to finish the project for him, because he knew he wasn't going to be able to get it done before he died. That was on his deathbed in 1908. So that's it. But that method didn't happen until 1923, many, many, many years later.
In 1923, Gobert honored a promise that he had made to Taffanel on his deathbed in 1908. It was to complete the large flute method Taffanel had prepared over many years. He entrusted his exercise materials to his favorite student, Gobert, to consolidate into a formal flute method, which was a long-standing tradition of Paris Conservatory teachers dating back to the beginning of the conservatory in 1795. Unfortunately, another Taffanel student named Henri Bouillard published Taffanel's 17 daily exercises under his own name. Gobert had become aware of this. A court case ensued against Bouillard. These 17 daily exercises were originally on scraps of paper that Taffanel had kept in a large cabinet at the conservatory, from which his students could borrow for practicing until they had it memorized. All of Taffanel's students, including Gobert, had learned to play using these Taffanel exercises. Gobert recognized that Bouillard was plagiarizing Taffanel's work and fought with the Taffanel family and the director of the conservatory in a court case, which they won. Bouillard's studies were withdrawn by the publisher and remaining copies destroyed. This undoubtedly put added pressure on Gobert to finally carve out the time to prepare Taffanel's flute method as he had promised. Marcel Moïse remembers assisting Gobert in the afternoons following morning orchestra rehearsals to patch together the various Taffanel exercises found on scraps of paper that today form the materials found in the complete method for flute by Taffanel and Gobert.
Penny, the editor's preface stated that Gobert contributed much of his own material to the method.
When I interviewed Moïse in 1982, he insisted that all of the source material was Taffanel's, and that Gobert's intent was to present Taffanel's exact ideas. He only added a section of orchestral excerpts that updated the method.
Georges Barrère, who had studied with Taffanel at the same time as Gobert, insisted that the method contained too much of Gobert and not enough of Taffanel.
Who is to say? The complete method is a combination of step-by-step instruction, combining theory and practice in a large collection of studies and exercises and excerpts of difficult passages in flute works. The breathing section was an important aspect of the French flute school. The golden rule is, take a breath whenever it is possible without breaking the phrase. This method is an encyclopedia for the flute in its 227 pages organized into 8 sections. This method immediately took the flute world by storm. The French original was soon published into English, German, and Spanish. The 17 daily exercises are the daily exercises embraced by developing and advanced students from around the world. It is still in print today and used by thousands of flutists more than 108 years after Taffanel's death.
I think that we love the Madrigal because we love the fact that it's short, it's sweet, it has beautiful phrasing, it has changes in key, it has a faster middle point in the ABA form that it has, and it's very satisfying to play it.
Mm-hmm.
When you finish playing, you go, oh, I love that piece. You say that rather than, boy, what a dog.
It's a morsel of goodness.
Yes, it's a morsel of goodness. And I think that's why so many people still love playing it. And it's short.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Madrigal is dedicated to a Dr. Buquois from the Academy of Medicine.
This piece was written in the year of Paul Taffanel's death and is a Gobert favorite among flutists. It is in ABCA form, a variation of a second rondo form, or a modified Sonate Allegro form. Its beautiful melody starting in A minor moves to G major and ends in E minor. It is a memorable melody. The B theme is in F sharp minor, moving to E major. The middle section is a true development section with material from A and B in fragments going through a series of key changes. The return of the A section is an exact return from the beginning of the piece in A minor, closing in G major. There have been many interpretations of this short jewel of a piece. Gobert recorded it in 1919. William Bennett, well-known British flutist, upon hearing Gobert's performance of his madrigal, wrote, quote, "This," referring to Gobert's playing, "to me is truly modern playing at its best. It has everything that I've heard from the best modern players, and maybe much more. He has a wonderful ability to change his color, to change his vibrato, and has a complete control over the rubato, which is used expressively. You can hear his virtuosity with elegance. The musicality is comparable to the greatest violinist. You could listen to Chrysler or somebody. His vibrato is used in the tone. The tone is expressive all of the time, changing all of the time."
Throughout history, we've had changes to our instrument, resulting in changes to performance practice and to the concept of what's modern. So, regardless of the style of the tone, the width of the vibrato you choose, or the tempo you decide upon, don't let your interpretation be the only one you use. Keep an open mind and discover how we've changed over time and in our playing of this wonderful tune. A madrigal originally was a story with text, so find your story and sing it as your madrigal. So it's difficult to play, just dial it all back down and play Madrigal so efficiently. Can you speak about the long phrases? Did they go for very long on these? Did they breathe a lot? I always wondered.
I think part of the difference between their instruments and those that we play now is the fact that they played on very light, thin instruments. And so the breath capacity that's required is, it can go longer. It can do a longer phrase than what many of the instruments that we play today, which give us more projection, and it's a larger voluminous sound. And their instrument, I saw his Louis Lot being worked on in New York at the Flute Center of New York. And it's light. It's a very thin flute, very thin. And they were all very thin back then, very thin. So their long free, everything that they did was to make the flute sing like the violin. I mean, the violin and the human voice were always their inspiration, so to speak.
Oh. So let's move on to this sonata number 1. Wow, you just answered that question of how you can go so long on a phrase. I mean, that's some of these sonata number 2, right? And have these big long phrases. Speak to that, Penny. How should we think of those?
I think you have to be thinking the long, and if you need a breath, you need to do a quick catch breath that folds right into the longer phrase. If you divide it into smaller catch breaths, because they thought long, they really did, and they were developing those phrases too. So there was a lot of intensity building up to the top of the phrase many times. So you need extra intensity in your sound to be able to really do the musical part of it.
why is it sonata in A and then deuxième and troisième? I mean, is that just editors and publishers?
I think it was just to give it a clarity on which one it was.
Oh,
You know,
got it.
yeah, I don't think there's anything more to it than that. And what I like about Gobert, he was such a people person that most of these flute pieces that we play were written for friends of his.
We love that, don't we?
Yeah, we love it.
We love that. We pay
we
attention to
love
it on
it.
our study guide. Yeah.
We love it. And I don't think he would have written it except for the fact that he wanted to write something for his friend. Sometimes he would divide a larger piece into, giving different people a movement, so to speak, a different friend. He'd write a different friend one of the movements and then put them together into a bigger work. And I think it was maybe more of a tradition back then, but it also loved the orchestra at the opera. He loved the Associated Concert du Conservatoire, all of the players there. They were his best friends.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very apt that he named Sonata in A in 1918 and dedicates it to Paul Taffanel.
Yes.
His teacher, he said.
Yes, mon maître. There wasn't much on Gobert. And so I thought, okay, maybe he's the right subject and I could make it into my dissertation. Then I started to realize that the Library of Congress had a whole lot of literature there that no one else had. That included going way back. They had original newspapers, the French musical newspapers. They came out twice a week, Le Monde Musical and Le Ménestrel. Those were the two. And literally, I spent hundreds of hours reading these original newspapers that already were 70, 80 years old. I mean, some of them. And what I started reading was, here's Gobert on page 1. Here's Gobert on page 3. Here's Gobert on page 5. Here's Gobert again on page 6. And so that would be 1 week. Okay, here's Gobert. He's conducting this one. Then he's conducting this one. Then this one's a student of Gobert at the conservatoire. I mean, it was amazing. And that became part of my dissertation that's unique, I think, because most people don't have access to these newspapers. So then I started to look into, okay, I could make this kind of a review of his flute piano repertoire, because there was enough of it and it expanded over a large amount of time throughout his life. So I could show, how it changed as he got older and more mature and stuff. And so I decided to go with that. And I never fell out of love with him. The whole time I was stressing over everything with that dissertation, and a lot of composers you would get sick of that you were studying. But I never got tired of listening to his pieces, of playing through his pieces, of analyzing his pieces, and realizing that this guy was a product of his time. He was writing in the style of the period. It wasn't a forward style necessarily. It was a normal style of the period. And he was writing for other instruments too. He has a beautiful trombone piece. He has some lovely vocal pieces. He has a ballet. He has a couple of operas. But the thing is, he knew the flute best, and he kept getting asked to write more flute pieces by the flutists in
This
Paris.
has been such a great effort on behalf of Gobert by you, and thank you so much for joining me on this. I don't know, do you have anything to say for our members of SEMFA or any student about, why Gobert is so important to learn?
Well, it's just beautiful music.
Period.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Just fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And take little catch breaths.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.